So the first thing I will say, who we have, you can see an amazing woman, an attractive woman. If you want to know more about Anna, you can go onto her page and look at her page. And underneath there is more things about Anna. Of course, this is all in German. And you can see a description of her, and that she works for Hoch X Academy. You also can find her books, the books that she has been working with in this Hoch X Academy. I feel what is done, special normal, archetypal trust, the gift of empathy, different in many ways. So she's been working head off, switch your gut on. And her latest book, Erotic Intelligence. And I think this is not just the only subject, but a subject where it's important to look at this when you think highly sensitive people, they are very sensitive. And how do we work with this sensitivity, even when we're coming into closeness, especially physical closeness in a partnership? And that is our subject for today. So maybe you can share a little bit with us how you can work with this high sensitivity, and why you started this academy. What is your goal? Great, so wonderful. Good evening. My high sensitivity, I am privileged. I already had highly sensitive parents, and so this was never a problem. It was normal to be sensitive, and it was also normal, as my parents described, to arrange my life according to this sensitivity. So this sensitivity was something that was taken for granted. And it was only when I went to school that I noticed this wasn't the case everywhere. And there was more difficulties. The students had this difficulty. And then at home, there was this, it was only when I started working with people at home, and later as a life coach and as a advisor for people who are highly gifted, that they do not have that many advisors or that many supporters. There are not that many places where they can speak with people who share the same difficulties. And that's a very important point, because they often feel quite alone. They feel they're kept out of things, and sometimes they feel a little bit crazy. And the perception that they have is not to be understood. And so I decided to work completely with these people. And I've been doing this now for 20 years for highly sensitive people and highly gifted people, all people who have a special neurological issue or a special neurological perception. Anna, thank you. So 20 years you've been doing this, and you pour your heart's blood into this. And what are the most important themes that you've experienced? Well, I've kind of mentioned this, that this consciousness of that one is not really self-confident. I had a lot of luck with my family, but if you're in an ordinary family, you always feel excluded, and mostly you have an unpleasant reaction of your perceptions. And later in the school, kindergarten, or later when you're studying or working, this is very difficult. And it's like a constant trauma. And this is all that happens with these people with these delicate souls. So the most important thing is that highly sensitive people will learn how to create borders around themselves in a healthy way, and not to think that somebody's at last going to come and support me. So where does highly sensitiveness start? Well, that's not so easy to answer. If I recognize, you look around, you talk to people, and they react to something completely different to what you do, then you noticed, you recognize things which the others don't even notice. Tiny mimics, micro mimics, comments, something that is an anxiety, something that you recognize and they don't even notice. And this sensitivity can be physical, it can be emotional, or on the mental level, to feel what the mood is like in the space. If somebody is feeling happy or feeling aggressive, if somebody is in love, or if somebody's angry. And it's very individual. And there is this kind of mixing. Some people are very light sensitive, somebody's a touch sensitive. And on this sensitive, they can be very emotional, or they can also be very empathetic. They can be very good therapists or coaches. And it's very individual. You can't say so many grams or so many centimeters. It's very individual. I meet many people who say, I notice that I'm very sensitive, and that has changed me a lot. So what sort of a step is this? I'm very experienced. I'm very sensitive to smells, or I can't relax in a cafe because of the noise. And what sort of a step is this when I discover I am highly sensitive? And unfortunately, it is the way people suffer. So when somebody's almost reaching burnout, which often happens, or if they've had mobbing and they're feeling lonely, when when they're having a depressive episode, and that's when they start looking for answers. And they look in internet, and then they recognize that they don't have a deficit. So it's not a lack, but they have something more than other people. And this changes a lot in the perception. And this is usually in searching for why are they suffering so much. And unfortunately, they have to struggle a lot, and they believe that something is not the same for them. And what do they discover? So my first book that I wrote was exceptionally normal. And 10% of people belong to this group. They don't show it so much. They try not to recognize themselves as highly sensitive. And we know this picture when a woman is pregnant, suddenly she sees everybody who's pregnant, all babies. And if you've just bought a red VW, then you'll notice all the red VWs on the road. So this is the same thing with highly sensitive people. You recognize that there are many people who are similar to this, who are delicate and sensitive. And the first effect is usually, oh, what a relief. I notice I'm not alone. I notice I have people to talk to, people I can share with. And this is often very freeing. So you've described an aspect. One is very sensitive in the family. Suddenly one is normal in the family, and then outside of the family, one tries to avoid this. And then you suddenly have this step where I recognize, I can do something with this. So there seems to be a whole palette here. And if you look at your partnership, if you're a highly sensitive person, what sort of problems, what sort of challenges meet highly sensitive people in a partnership? Well, gosh, that's a lot. Let's just think of the ordinary example in the office. When if somebody rests their hand over my shoulder and they sort of trying to reassure me, and they're patting me or tapping me or smoothing me, it drives me crazy. It's like an electric shock. And this communal touch language, you have to find this. And you have to say, please, if you're going to put your hand on my shoulder, just keep it still. Don't rub it. Or people's smells. Some people, I just cannot bear the smell. And some people are very fragrant. I don't mean people who are wearing perfume, but people have a very pleasant aroma about them. And if you're highly sensitive, you have to really rely on this. So it's not that you want to be alone, but if you're with a partner, you need to talk about it. So you can't cling on to them, but if you try and make time for yourself so that you can be alone. And that is quite a typical issue in a partnership. It must be right. So you have somebody and you all have different facets, and there's a moment where not everything does match. It must match so that highly sensitive people can feel comfortable, and we rarely notice it if it doesn't match. But what can you do if it doesn't match? And it's no point in putting on rose-colored spectacles to enter your partnership. So it's very important that often highly sensitive people hold back because they often are seeking for harmony. They try and avoid issues. And stress is a main factor, unpleasant factor for highly sensitive people. And the hormones that circulate means you can't really recover from this. So to have peace inside, that's very important. So you just collapse inwardly. So how do I communicate? How do I communicate with myself? And how do I communicate with my partner? And if my partner isn't communicative, how can he or she learn to be communicative? So communication is often needed if things don't match. So it seems like there's always a conflict potential because the other person might not feel seen. And because of this wish for harmony, and one is so much in the state of perceiving, because one is such a highly sensitive person. So something's not quite right, but how do I enter into this? How do I enter into this without lying to myself? So this really demands an ability to put things on the side. And at 30, I didn't have this. I had to learn it. I had to learn to communicate, to say what I need. I cannot fulfill any of my needs if I cannot if I cannot actually express them. I have to look into the person's eyes and tell them what bothers me, what doesn't bother me, what I need now, what I need tomorrow. So the most important thing is the skill to communicate. What can I express? What do I not express? If I can't express this, then I don't get it. I don't receive it. And a lot of people do not ask themselves the question, what is my need? These are high X people. I'm not quite sure what she means by that, but the high X people often do not ask themselves what they need. And I immediately have a high stress level when I imagine that that is not going to be fulfilled. So I'm feeling my stress levels rising and rising, and it's very clear in my body. And so the call comes to actually talk. And what makes this difficult? Speaking. I know I have this issue too. Something bothers me and I carry it around with me. I don't manage to get it out. I know I should say something, but I just can't. So the fear of being refused, fear of losing the love. So people who have expressed something and then they get a slap. And as a child, you were always moaned at or punished. And as a child, your mother is not very happy. And you say, what's wrong with your mother? And she says, no, everything's fine. So the child learns to doubt itself and never to speak these things out. And when you have made this experience that you have to learn this anew in a partnership, that I can speak my perceptions, and then I ask you to listen, you don't have to react. And this is a culture of communication that is necessary. And you have to realize that there's going to be misunderstandings and you're going to have to put up with them. You're going to have to live through them. But if you don't speak at all, then your soul is going to collapse. And then the bodily symptoms come, and then you become ill or burnout. So how can we work with communication as the first thing to do? So most of us experience a high sensitivity as something very special. This is something rich. But you say, and with these sense impressions, it's not really, it's sometimes something's too light or too bright or too loud. So we have a challenge to come into communication. And we don't come out of the spiral. And one has to somehow take a jump. And maybe this is not a jump, but we need little baby steps. We don't need a big jump. So try and talk about something. So it has the comfort zone, beyond the comfort zone, and then it has the panic zone. And if I leave my comfort zone, not jumping in, but to try what is possible, what can we improve to take care of oneself? So some people just want to put their toe in the water so that they are not too over challenged. Do you have a practical example? Do you have a conflict situation? I can't bear the smell of your mouth. And this happened to me this week. I was in a seminar house with 20 people, and I'm not sure what she said, if they were using perfume. And he was walking quite far away, and I nearly vomited. I think she must have meant halitosis, bad breath. So I thought, I'm going to have to make an appointment with him. Can I please request something of you? And I had to air the room because of the way you smell. I think she said he is using perfume. And I said, I have too much. The perfume is just too much for me. And he said, oh, that's okay. I won't wear it. But I really had to think about this. And you probably know this. This man is one of those who are threatened very quickly. In his face, you just have this tiny example of please do it this way or please do it that way. His whole face drops and he's really deeply hurt. And you have to actually wrap it up as a gift wrap. And then he could accept it. But it took me a whole day to figure out how to talk to him about that. And what was the trick that you had found? So I didn't bring it as a threat. So this is not against you, but this is something for me. I become ill when I smell perfume. So please, can you leave the perfume? Because I feel bad. I feel ill. And then he could accept it. That if they realize it's not something against them, then they can accept it better. So perfume you can stop wearing, but what about if the body smells just of their own self? Or even if one breathes in a particular way, that's not so easy for somebody to change the way they breathe. So there's a kind of a limit. You reach a limit. So how do you bring critique to somebody that they can't really change? So if you say to somebody, oh, I would love it if you had brown curly hair, you can just say back, I'm sorry, I don't have brown curly hair. But how do you bring constructive criticism? I wouldn't say to him, if he's 190 centimeters, saying to him, it would be better if you were smaller. And some things are not important for me to criticize. And I remember this about breathing. He had bad breath because he had a disease of his stomach. I just preferred to have him sitting next to me or sitting far away from me. And I avoided long conversations with him. And I thought to myself, I can cope for 30 minutes with this. And you have to weigh this up. What is more valuable to me? When it's very important to me and I really value this person, can I cope with it? If there's a good reason, then I can cope with it. If Friedrich Nietzsche said, if you have and understand, if you found the meaning of life, you can cope with more or less anything. So I love this person in a relationship. And then if he likes to wear perfume, I would rather give him perfume that I like. Or if somebody had bad breath, I would say, go to the dentist and have some oral hygiene done. Or maybe go to the doctor and find out if you've got something wrong with your tummy. And I often have difficulty saying something to somebody. Maybe it's because I'm a man, but I'm anxious about criticizing someone. And they would have difficulty accepting it, even as I have anxiety to say it. And these are sometimes very deep deep experiences. So if I'm anxious, then it comes across badly. So I realized later that he had often this issue with perfume, and people would sit at the table with him and then they'd move away, and that would also hurt him. But when I said it, it didn't, it bothered me. It didn't agree with me. And I've often experienced that if I say something that is of value, then the people can take it on. I have often given people a deo, a deodorant. So if I wrap it up in as a gift wrap, and then they look at it and they say, "Oh, are you trying to tell me something?" And then I can jokingly answer, "Yeah, maybe you need a shower." So what does this high sensibility come from? That I can integrate it. So I don't sacrifice my high sensitivity. The high sensitivity raises pressure when you meet people, you can't hide them. But this pressure of suffering something and yet of wanting to be harmonious that you are the person who actually speaks it out to the people. We don't have to just have one example, but you typically end up being the one who says it to these people, which at the end of the day can become a gift. So a rather strange example. So this perfume actually had never been talked about before. And if you think of a work context or a family context, people say, do this, do that. So if somebody's always giving in and you notice they actually are no longer happy, they become very silent and they've never experienced that somebody's never said to them, do you want to chat with me? Let's go for a walk. Tell me about it. Some people just pull back and they don't ever talk about it. They can't have a face-to-face. So if we go for a walk, the person's next to me, and in that way it's possible to talk about something more so than sitting opposite one another. So if we're in a partnership and one thinks, oh, one is always pushed away, one is excluded, and what do you experience as a good combination? Would you have a highly sensitive person with another highly sensitive? Or is it better to have one highly sensitive and one not? Well, I know both work. I have seen very happy partnerships over decades where one is highly sensitive and the other is not. But I also know where they are both highly sensitive, and I know conflicts out of both sides. And one has to be very careful. Highly sensitive people think of the normally sensitive, that they are not sensitive, they are normally sensitive. Even, and a narcissist may even, that I'm not quite sure what she was meaning by that, sorry. But the normally sensitive person, they are reliable, constant, and so for a highly sensitive person, they can be a great help. But there is a lot of potential critique from a pair of highly sensitive people. Some people might say, I don't like going to football. I don't like going to concerts. I don't like going to family groups. But if you have a partner who really loves large groups of people, then that's very difficult. And you have to express this and to show, what do you need? Sensitivity is actually not that much of an issue. It's more about communication. You can speak with sensible or insensible. So in the communication, the meeting. And the meeting encounter is something to do with your attitude. If you have a loving, a well-wishing attitude that is connected to my inner presence. And a lot of you will know what I'm talking about. This approach. They know if it's valuing, then they will also enter into communication. But if you come with a threatening attitude, or if you're trying to protect yourself from conflict, but if you reach out towards the person and you reach over to them with in a loving way, and of course this is always a bit different. So in the meeting is such an important issue, even in a partnership. So the physical meeting and also the motif for the partnership, and what do highly sensitive people, how do they experience sexuality? Can they have a happy sex life? And what can you offer us? So the ability to experience something is necessary to have an intimate relationship. When we recognize that we are not just able to do this, but we actually can, we need to have a certain amount of love towards ourselves, a certain amount of self-confidence. And if it's an erotic or bodily relationship, to try and experiment, to say, what do I like, what don't I like? And then the next step to actually express this, and that this highly sensitivity doesn't get in the way. But it is almost a gift, you could say, where you can have a healthy and lovely partnership. And that's what we would all wish for. And yet this is the area where a lot of hurt takes place. That even unconsciously our loved ones could maybe hurt us. And we have this wish to meet in a better way. And the disappointment is often so close. And how do you get out of the spiral of expectations and disappointment? So this is a delicate issue. I have a big difference between a partnership and a relationship. A partnership is when they don't use the other. They can be very much alone with themselves. They can live alone with themselves, and they don't need the partner to affirm that they are a human being. And in people who need one another, but can love one another in a free way, am I with you or not? That is a partnership which can survive the crises. And this neediness means I will take my love away, or you're not good enough. And this creates expectations. Expectations. They set us up for disappointment. If I don't have any expectations, then I take everything that comes my way as a gift. I think about my parents, to highly sensitive people, and my father was an Asperger's, and every Saturday, they were married for 60 years, every Saturday he brought her a rose, and my mother wished that he would just take her by the arm and say, I love you. But he couldn't say this to her. But he did buy her one rose every Saturday and occasionally chocolates. And my mother actually took a long time that her expectation, which was never going to be fulfilled, but this was his way of expressing love. He expressed the same thing as what she wished for, just in his way. And it took her many, many, many years to accept that this is his way of saying, I love you. And an exclusive relationship or a polymorph relationship. And one has to think about this and to look at what is, what do I expect? And this must be, this should be, and this could be in a partnership. And then you could decide how much of a compromise am I going to make? And partnership only works with compromises. It's a long journey to first of all experience it oneself, then to experience it in one's body, and then to realize that if somebody actually hugged me, that is a long journey. And my mother said she even learned to love him. My mother learned many lovely things. So she would iron his shirts, and then she would show him all the shirts that she'd ironed. And she wanted him to praise her. And then she said, can't you take me in your arms to say thank you? One is allowed to express these things. One of the themes that you mentioned earlier, relationship and partnership. Relationship is a bit of a, almost like a struggle. See in German means to pull. So pulling together. And this develops of its own. If you have this communication skill, you know you can get through crises. If you know you've made it through crises, then of itself, the partnerships, it's not just what I need, but having a lovely feeling, being grateful, to know that we're working on this together. And we have a relationship with many young people that are just a series of monogamous relationships. And they're hoping that each of the next relationship is going to become better. But if you don't work with yourself, they will all just be the same. And if you're the one who sacrifices, then this pulling that you experience in the relationship just continues. And I realized after a while myself that it was up to me. And that's when I had to really think deeply about it. So now I look into those of people who are listening, and that those people who want to write questions in the chat please write your questions in the chat. That I need to get to know my needs. I need to get to know to communicate my needs. And then I have to have the idea that I'm allowed to have a need. But what do I need? And can you generalizing is always a difficult thing. But what are the needs that we could discover? So I will ask you a question, and then you can feel into it. Where is there a deep wish that is not yet fulfilled? What would be so wonderful if that could happen? If you could experience that. And then in that way, you come to your needs. You find something that is living in you. Something that's important for you. It's worthwhile. Has a high value in your life. And so you can find out what are your needs. And in that way, you can then try and fulfill them. What is your deepest wish? So one of the first things a highly sensitive person would like to be understood. Understood as I am. Also to learn to build my borders. I can be alone. I don't mind being alone if Harold isn't there, and we can telephone each other from time to time. If he rang me 3 times a day, that would be far too much for me. Whereas other people like that. To be alone, to rest enough to build up my energy. So a conversation of 2 people or 4 people, that's already quite difficult. If one's in a party, at a party, chatting away with this one and that one, I just can't do that. So one time I was invited to a social meeting, and afterwards I was really, really nervous. My whole body was shaking. And when I tried to explain this to people, they just thought this was nonsense. So one has all these needs. And how can I integrate them into myself so that my partner, that you can be, that I can be conscious of what I need, and that these needs, that I receive the needs that I have. I don't actually find my question. You can see I'm getting stuck. Do you want to look at what is stuck there? I wish so much. So when I think of what are my needs, my chair becomes warm because I'm sinking into all my wishes. So try and cut off a few slices of your mountain of wishes So something that is concrete. So if I sink into this chair that is so warm, so full, so is there a test for HSP? So on our website, there are various tests. And in internet, there are lots of tests that you can find for HSP. But there are no scientifically validated tests for highly sensitive people. They are usually just landmarks, and usually it is relevant or slightly relevant. Is this neurodiversity? Yes, it is. And are there any practical advantages? The practical advantages, and you've also said this, do you want to be a normal, sensitive person? No. The advantages are tremendous. I can deeply see into human beings. I can experience people. It's like almost like reading thoughts. The body language, the gests, the mimics, the attitude, the way somebody speaks. It's a gift. It's a gift to be able to smell. I never eat anything moldly. And I've heard of people who eat moldy things because I will smell it's going moldy before it is moldy. And I can smell, my children smell different when they're ill. The whole body chemistry changes and you can smell it. And your taste and your smell. And the barista cooks have also this quality. I don't know if it's always helpful, but there are some areas where it's very helpful. So where are one's own highly sensitive qualities, where one can create something good? So this could be with animals, it could be with the environment, this sensitivity, and highly sensitive people are often perfect troubleshooters. They see the problems before they've actually become fully manifest or with other people. And you've said something quite important. One sees so much, and this transformation, it could bring something. People who don't give back in their lives. And this is something that has already come up. Ah, I'm sensitive. What do I need? And a door opens to experience something that has flowed through this. And I don't know who was saying that, but if you look around, if you've categorized yourself, and so I'm on the path to discover my highly sensitiveness. Each person on his own path. So I am sure that if the highly sensitive people would not downsize themselves, but that they would live in a normal sensitive world, and that the health system, the nourishment would improve, and especially when they came into their own power, this radiation that would, where you drop a stone into water and you see these waves, circle waves flowing out into the world. So I think we could all live more happily. Highly sensitive people have a way of coming into my own power, of empowering me. And maybe we could have some final statements here. And one could see which of my wishes has been fulfilled. Would you see this? And I would always see the positive. I don't see problems. I see a chance. I see a potential solution. And you can develop this. This is your attitude. Positively thinking, being an optimist, it makes life much more beautiful. We have the same glass, we have the same water, but how do I see it? And that is your choice. And choosing this is up to you. I think it's great if you can get to that point, but the highly sensitive person often also sees the half empty glass. Seems to me quite a delicate, it doesn't suit me. So it's not that we're all just going to live in a heavenly world. We can't have the sun shining all the time, but I have the choice. What sort of thoughts do I carry? What do I compare myself with? Do I choose the hair in the soup? Do I look for the hair in the soup? And this is an attitude towards life that you can change. I had depression for 20 years. From 14 to 34, I was in a state of depression. Everything was always half full. And I noticed I could change myself. I could make a choice. I could vegetate in this depression, or I could list the positive aspects. How do people work with their anger? Anger can be something wonderful. And one always needs to have baby steps. So to go step by step and to look at yourself carefully and not to challenge yourself too much. So shall we have that as our last word? Taking baby steps, watching your own way of being. So you can find Anna on the website, on her website. This is Harold and Anna, her partner. And you can find her website on the conference. And next time we'll be looking at intuition. And this will be very well connected. One of the questions, is everything just something that I've learned from society, or how can I get to my own needs? And this will be a very intuitive way. Join us in researching the subject of high sensitive people, highly sensitive people. It's very, very fruitful. Thank you, Anna. You've been a pioneer. Thank you so much for your encouragement on our path. Thank you. Thank you very much. Great success in your work. Thank you, and joy in your many conferences.